Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is in the news with a lot of critical and commercial praise for the game from this first-time studio. And for today's critical thought, I want to talk about what this game did very well and the big takeaway lesson for all designers if you're trying to build a game in an established or trying to stay on a new genre in the market today. This is not going to be a review of Expedition 33 as we're still going through it, but it is definitely on pace to being a surprise and very successful game of 2025. Now, the studio was made up of, I believe, industry veterans, I believe from Ubisoft, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. But the game definitely shows an attention to detail and use of design that we normally don't see from very first-time developers. There's a tendency, as we've said and we've seen plenty of times over, that the very first game is going to be your attempt at recreating insert favorite genre here. I want to make a game like Mario. I want to make a game like Sonic, Doom, Quake, Red Alert, XCOM, whatever. But it takes a very delicate and very specific kind of designer to be able to look at a genre and see ways of iterating and refining it. And that is the very important aspect. And one thing that Clair Obscur does exceptionally well is that it is a JRPG. It's also has third-person shooter element and action. And it's also based in France. So I guess it's a TPSJARPG. I'll let you guys come with a clever acronym for that one. But if I were to place money, I would bet that one game the developers really studied when they were building Clair was Persona 5. And maybe even if they're still doing heavy design in 2024, Metaphor. Now, whether you love the main branch or the spin-off games of Shin Megami Tensei, you cannot deny that Persona 5 was very much a watershed moment for the franchise. This was the big breakout game for it, much like Yakuza 0 was for the whole Yakuza franchise here in the US. Persona 5 came with it a lot of flair and style. Things that we normally don't associate to JRPGs outside of the massive cutscenes and orchestral sounds of a Final Fantasy. It's not a game of just, character over here, and they're just taking turns whacking each other with swords. It uses angles. The entire GUI is kind of layered into the environment. It does a lot to sell the presentation of the game. And more notably, it does it in a way that feels very fast. Despite the fact that, of course, that intro, at least in the original Persona 5, was very long. And at some point, I do want to go back and play Persona 5 Royal. When we talk about studying a genre, be it an RPG, action, strategy, you name it, you have to be able to understand three things. What's good about the genre? What's bad about the genre? And what do people who love the genre come to expect of it? Because there are a lot of developers out there who, when they think outside the box, they are thinking 80 million miles that way. Let's make a space game or a flying game that's all about Superman 64 style physics and all those ring missions. Because everyone watching would love to play 80 to 100 hours of that over and over again. Or you have a case where people will take, again, wrong lessons out of games. That you just make a good game, that's all you need. I mean, that's the perfect lesson for every developer watching. Just make good game, and you'll make that billion-dollar success. We could probably just end this whole series here with just that one final point. Nevertheless, what Clair Obscur does really well is that it is a JRPG by name and trade. And if you are not a fan of JRPG design, this game is not going to be for you. And again, that is perfectly reasonable. What it does do is take everything that works and tries to mitigate or downplay everything that doesn't. A few notable examples. Inventory management. Most JRPGs, maybe some CRPGs, love to flood you with items. It's not just a healing potion. You have a small healing potion, medium healing potion, large healing potion, smallish medium, mediumish large, a wide healing potion, a narrow healing potion, a super healing potion, a super duper healing potion, and we can just keep naming them for the next hour. What this game does is just basically say, okay, you get 3 consumables, and they restore every time you go to a checkpoint, along with your kind of party-wide heal, or the ubiquitous, like, tent that we see from JRPG design. What it does is it streamlines the process. You still have to make an important decision as to when to heal, when to recover, when to revive. The only difference is that you're not staring at 87 million different bottles in your inventory that all have to be sorted one by one all over. And this goes with a very important lesson that we've talked about previously, that there is a difference between complexity and depth when we are building a game. A lot of people will misconstrue complexity as depth. You can throw 80 trillion skills, 57 perk trees, 87 quintillion weapons and class modifiers, and procedurally generated gear. That doesn't automatically make your game deep. They can make it very confusing to play and very hard to understand. But if you're not or if the player is not understanding the choices that go in their decision making, none of that really matters. You can have a super compelling, incredibly nail-biting decision, and it can all come down to, do I try to attack for 3 points of damage, or try to attack for 1 point of damage, or 1.5? This gets again at low number design. That is another topic in of itself. With Clair Obscur, another thing that it does again is that it speeds up combat. In an earlier video that we did, I think this was like late 2024, early 2025, I talked about some of the issues I had with action commands. And how a lot of developers, the action command is simply considered the norm of combat. You are supposed to hit each and every one exactly, because that's the only way you're going to fight these enemies normally. And if you don't do it, you go from doing 50 points of damage to 0.075. In Clair Obscur, at least on the normal difficulty, you can fail every single action command in that game, and you can still reasonably beat a lot of the enemies and bosses, not counting the elite and optional fights, and especially not if you're playing this on hard mode. And the difference is that when you score a parry, or the perfect parry in that game, more than likely you will one-shot a normal enemy, or at least do 3 to 5 times more damage than your normal hit to a boss or elite. And of course, it feels very snappy to do this because combat moves very fast. In the span of us doing a battle in Clair Obscur, we could probably be stuck in another like super lengthy one in something like Eichenfell, or there's I think a few other action command ones that we've played. In fact, in the length of one of those battles, you could probably do at least 3 to 5 normal battles in Clair with that. And again, when we talk about design like this, it sounds very simple. Just make your game faster, make it streamlined, more dynamic, more aerodynamically designed. All those buzzwords will truly make your game better. But what does it mean to study a game? When we talk again about peak Blizzard, this would be mid-90s, so I guess like early to mid-2010s. We've said this before. Blizzard, at their best, was not a studio of invention or creating something new. They were the masters at iteration, looking at a genre and going, this works, this doesn't, throw this in. And it led to some incredibly refined and polished games that always managed to kind of break out of their individualized ecosystems. If you look again at World of Warcraft, it was, I guess, technically the third big MMOG, if we count, of course, Ultimate Online and EverQuest. And I think I'm forgetting a few others at that time. But what World of Warcraft did so well, and what kept its legacy for years, was say, hey, you like all the stuff in the MMOG genre, but you don't like all of this? Well, our game is all of this and a lot more. Come and play it. And it worked. And it's again why kind of the Blizzard seal of quality during those 20 years was such a huge deal and a major point about that studio. Now, where they're at today, I'll leave that to the hardcore fans to argue down below. But Blizzard's expertise at studying design is the main central point for today's video, and the big aspect of Clair Obscur's success. As I said a few minutes ago, I would bet that they studied some of the major examples and that everyone on that team has played, consumed, analyzed, loved, hated, and everything in between JRPGs. Much like the success of Baldur's Gate 3 from Larian Studios, that Larian has been in this CRPG game, again, for I think over 20 years. They have seen them all, they've played them all, they know what works, they know what doesn't work. And as I said earlier, they know what fans want to see. But again, it gets at this point that when you're building a game like this and understanding who the market is, there will be people who are not going to like it. And that is perfectly acceptable. There's no such thing as the ultimate perfect game that hits every market demographic perfectly and everyone's going to fall in love with it and will win every award unanimously across the board. As a designer, you have to understand that every decision that you make, be it good, bad, or indifferent, is going to focus your game's core demographic. Someone who likes to play first-person shooters is probably not going to care if you add in a turn-based strategy mode. Or if you're building a turn-based strategy game, they're probably not going to be interested if you want to throw in a stealth section. Or, I don't know, a Vampire Survivors Bullet Heaven building tech tree in your game. And as a developer, you have to be able to understand what it is you're trying to build and who the market is going to be for it. Because people who play certain genres like certain aspects of it. And as I've said again, there's nothing wrong with designing the perfect entry point into a genre. That game, it's not meant for the person who spent every year replaying every single Final Fantasy game, or has been in every Doom, Quake, Hexen, and whatnot on the highest difficulty. There are people who are interested in a genre, but they don't want to play something that is aimed at someone who has already mastered it in and out. And this was, again, one of the issues I had with a lot of CRPGs, and maybe at some point I'll finally try Baldur's Gate 3 and see what all the fuss is about. But the problem for me for a lot of CRPG design is that they immediately start with you trying to build your perfectly optimized character before you've even seen what your character looks like or what the world is. And that is very demanding. It's why, like a lot of JRPGs, that basically say, okay, you start with nothing, start piling up the skills and perks and attributes and all that great stuff. It's again why I love so many ARPGs. The point, and again, what Clair Obscur does really well, is that it laser focus on what makes JRPG design so compelling. The different character interactions, being able to build and customize and personalize your team, coming with those outlandishly overpowered, broken builds that all of a sudden your characters just nuke the enemy. I was reading a forum and one of the people was talking about their super powerful, explosive strategy, which sounds just like the build that I described in Ceruleum. And don't make me describe that build again, because I don't have enough air in my lungs right now for it. But a point that always comes up when we talk about successes like Baldur's Gate 3, Clair Obscur, Peak Blizzard, pick any major game, Darkest Dungeon, Balatro, Blueprints, people will always rush and just say, well, the developers made a good game, that's it. Or they just got lucky. And it's very hard, again, to understand what a game does really well. And the difference between the fan mindset and developer mindset is that the fan will say that game did nothing wrong. That's exactly how it should be. It's perfect. Everyone who hates it is just an idiot or a liar. A good developer will look at that game and understand what it did right and again what it did wrong. And when we say wrong in this respect, we're not saying this as this damning, smoking gun evidence that this game was always a fraud and it was always bad and no one ever realized it. Or, the old YouTuber drama. This game that you really love has really been bad this whole time and so killed the genre. Or, games are dying and so on and so forth. But it's about understanding how a game targets its audience. Because if a game targets its audience perfectly, the faults don't necessarily matter at that point. And if it's a game or if it's a genre that is very understaffed or underserved, faults don't mean anything if that is literally the only game you're getting for the next 4 to 5 years. We've talked about this before with Paradox Interactive with their games. They are exceptionally difficult to get into, but their fans don't mind that because they're not finding another game like that in town. And when someone does come along to kind of punch above their weight class, those studios tend to get into a lot more trouble. As we saw with Bethesda over the last few years, that a lot of smaller developers are making CRPGs about massive worlds and building a character and do all the Elder Scrolling stuff. And they're doing it without all the bugs and issues that have plagued those games day one. And to begin to wrap things up for our video, when we see successful games, you want to be able to study and analyze how does this game hit that genre, and what did they do to avoid any pain points or issues? Because I've always said this, that as a developer, if you are interested in building a game in whatever genre you want, play the good games, play the bad games, play the weird games, the obscure ones, the ones everyone hated, the ones everyone loved, get as wide of a spectrum of games to study. And look at what annoys you. If you are a hardcore fan of the genre, you play every single RPG, you have all the cosmetics for characters, you've bought, all the commercialized items for it. If there is something in that game or that genre that you hate, that annoys you, that frustrates you to no end, you better make sure that that is not in your game. Because as we've said this time and time again, the big names, your Final Fantasies, your Battlefields, Call of Duties, and whatnot, they can get away with having noticeable pain points and churn and issues like that in their games because they are very well established. They are already known. Someone who plays Call of Duty, if you go up to them and say, well, guess what? That one little thing that you didn't like, my game doesn't have it. Come give me $49.99. They're going to laugh in your face and go right back to playing the game that they've been enjoying now for over a decade. For a game to stand out, especially from a first-time studio, one that isn't really known or recognized yet, you do unfortunately have to punch above your weight. You have to be able to take that discerning eye to your genre that you love, that is your baby, that you cannot imagine saying anything bad about, and pointing out every single flaw that someone will hate this game for, that they will leave a negative review for, that they will turn off your game within 20 seconds of booting it up if they see it. Because if you can start understanding that and building systems and ways of avoiding those issues, it will not only lead to you being a better designer, but it will give your game a better chance in the market. Because as we've said, the consumer doesn't care. They don't care that you've spent the last 2 months, 10 years, $20, took 3 mortgages out on your house to finish a game. They just care about that product. And if that product annoys them, frustrates them, makes them angry, makes them throw out their computer, they're not going to care about all that. So here's my question to end things on for today's video. For those of you watching this, I've named some very notable examples of studios that have been really great at refining and taking a genre in a very approachable and fresh direction. What are some other examples? Can you think of studios that managed to take something that is very niche, very, again, specific in terms of its audience, and did something differently that made it better without subtracting from what makes that genre work for everyone else? It's a lot harder than it sounds to answer that question, but see if you can do that down below. At some point, I'll have my review of Clair Obscur up, so be sure to check that out. And with that, thanks for watching, and see everyone in the next video. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTubing stuff, be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and if you're interested in more in my thoughts on design, check out my game design books.